made a colossal mistake, one that I can't undo, and now it's only a matter of time before they come for me. It all started innocently enough, or as innocently as anything starts when you're dabbling in the darker recesses of the internet. I was a regular guy, a systems administrator for a mid-sized IT company, mostly handling network security, which ironically made me pretty good at navigating and exploiting those same networks. I suppose it was the monotony of the job that drove me to start browsing the dark web. It was curiosity at first, a harmless poke into a world I knew existed, but had never seen. But then I found the files. It wasn't even that hard, which was the scariest part. A few layers deep, a few backdoors exploited, and suddenly I was staring at a trove of documents stamped with warnings. Top secret, no fawn, stuff you see in movies. They were from some government agency that didn't exist in public records, or even whispered rumors. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. Documents detailed operations in domestic surveillance, experimental tech that could manipulate human thoughts, and even protocols for handling extraterrestrial materials. It was like finding out all the conspiracy theories were understatements. I downloaded everything, a knee-jerk reaction I regret every waking moment of my life now. Driven by a mix of fear and outrage, I did the unthinkable. I leaked the files. I thought I was being careful, using throwaway accounts, routing my connections through a dozen countries. I thought I was a ghost. But nothing is anonymous on the dark web, not really. They found me. It began with my email. One morning my inbox was flooded with messages, hundreds of them, all reading, "We know what you did." No sender, no trace of where they came from. Then my phone started ringing, unknown numbers only, voices distorted, telling me to watch my back. That was just the beginning. My life became a living horror movie overnight. One evening, I found a photo in my mailbox, a photo of me taken through my apartment window. It was printed on the back of a page ripped from one of the documents I'd leaked. Someone had written in big, bold letters, "No secret safe." The worst part came a few nights later. I woke up choking, the room spinning wildly. My limbs felt like they were weighed down by lead. There was a figure at the foot of my bed, just watching me struggle. I tried to scream, but my throat was so dry, no sound came out. The figure just stood there, unmoving, unblinking. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. When I finally managed to get up, my entire apartment was turned upside down, every drawer emptied, every book pulled from the shelf. But nothing was missing. Not a single item was taken. It was a message more than a burglary. They could reach me, touch everything I owned without taking anything. That's when the full weight of my actions hit me. I wasn't dealing with ordinary people. I was dealing with a shadow organization that could invade the most private parts of my life without a trace. Now, I live in a constant state of fear, jumping at every shadow, flinching at every noise. I keep moving, never staying in one place for more than a few nights. But no matter where I go, there's a sense that they are always just a step behind, waiting for the perfect moment to drag me into whatever hell they think I deserve. As I write this, I know it's only a matter of time before they catch up to me. I can't go to the police. Who would believe me? Who would protect me from something that officially doesn't exist? I'm posting this here, in this corner of the internet, hoping that if I disappear, if they do finally catch me, maybe someone will know the truth. Maybe someone will know that I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just curious. And now, that curiosity has cost me everything. After the initial horrors that befell me, I realized that merely running wasn't enough. The people, or entities, after me were not bound by conventional means. They didn't need to follow me. They were everywhere. I had to become invisible, so I cut off all ties with my past life. This meant living off the grid, a lifestyle that was alien and incredibly difficult for someone who had spent his life surrounded by technology. My savings allowed me to buy an old RV, unregistered, paid in cash from a dubious dealer who didn't ask questions. I drove it deep into the rural outskirts where cell phone towers became sparse, and the night was void of city lights. Here, Surrounded by nothing but the ominous sounds of the wilderness, my paranoia deepened. One night, the silence was shattered by the distinct sound of an engine in the distance. It grew louder, then stopped abruptly. I peeked through a sliver of curtain. In the dim moonlight, I could make out several figures disembarking from an unmarked black van. My heart raced. They had found me. In a panic, I killed all the lights and crouched below the windows. The voices outside were muffled, but the sound of footsteps crunching on gravel was unmistakably drawing closer. Suddenly, the front door of the RV shook violently. Someone was trying to break in. I crawled to the back, my mind racing for any means of escape or defense. The door then burst open with a deafening crack. I held my breath, squeezed into the tiny bathroom, the only barrier now between me and them. What felt like hours were probably minutes. The intruders methodically searched the RV. I could hear them overturning furniture, ripping cushions. Then, the bathroom door flung open, and I was face to face with a masked figure. Their eyes, visible through the mask, didn't look human. They were cold and emotionless. The figure pulled out a syringe and advanced towards me. My body froze in terror. I felt the needle pierce my arm, and a cold liquid fire spread through my veins. I woke up hours later, alone and disoriented. The RV was a mess, but oddly, nothing seemed to be taken. My laptop, my notes, even the hard drive with backups of the leaked files, they were all still there. It was as if their only goal was to inject me with whatever substance was in that syringe. The aftermath was torturous. I suffered from severe hallucinations and paranoia. I saw shadowy figures lurking in every corner, heard whispering voices that seemed to mock my despair. My physical health declined as well. I was constantly nauseous, my vision blurred, and at times I couldn't muster the strength to stand. I knew I couldn't stay after that. They could come back, and I might not wake up next time. So, I abandoned the RV, taking only essential items, and continued on foot, deeper into the woods. The further I went, the more the forest seemed to close in on me. Every rustle of leaves felt like a signal of my impending doom. Late one night, I stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, the wood rotting, the windows broken. But it was shelter, a place to hide. I barricaded the door with whatever furniture I could move and settled in for the night. That's when the real terror began. As I lay in the darkness, trying to quiet my mind, I heard it, a low droning sound, like a chant, coming from all around the cabin. The sound grew louder, more insistent. Figures appeared outside the window, their faces obscured by hoods, their hands raised as if performing some macabre ritual. I realized then that this wasn't just about the files anymore. It was about me. They weren't just tracking me, they were tormenting me, breaking me down psychologically before the inevitable end. I don't know how long I can keep this up, how long before I either turn myself in or they finally get what they want. But I'm writing this down, posting it wherever I can, in hopes that my story gets out, that it might warn others. Be careful of your curiosity. It might just be the end of you. After the haunting episode at the cabin, my trust in even the remotest semblance of safety shattered. The realization that the organization wasn't just after silence, but a deeper, more sinister form of submission, my total psychological breakdown, paralyzed me with dread. Their tactics evolved from physical intimidation to psychological warfare, preying on my deepest fears and insecurities. Driven by a desperate need for some semblance of control, I decided the only way to protect myself was to disappear completely. I dyed my hair, shaved my beard, and scavenged for discarded clothes that would make me unrecognizable, even to those who knew me best. Every mirror became a reminder of the stranger I had become, a shell governed by paranoia. As I wandered through small towns, avoiding any form of digital communication, I noticed peculiar patterns. Streetlights would flicker as I passed, televisions in shop windows would glitch, displaying static whenever I lingered too long. It wasn't long before I realized that these weren't coincidences. They were messages, a way for them to remind me of their omnipresence. One particularly chilling incident solidified my fear. While scavenging for food in a desolate supermarket late at night, I noticed that every aisle I entered, the overhead music would distort, turning into a low, guttural whispering. The words were indistinct, but the intent was clear: to frighten and disorient me. I fled, leaving behind the scant supplies I had gathered. As my mental state deteriorated, I found myself conversing with imagined allies and foes alike, unable to distinguish between paranoia and reality. My dreams provided no refuge, filled with vivid nightmares of chases through endless labyrinths, faceless pursuers always at my heels. It was during one of these aimless wanderings that I stumbled upon an old derelict library in a forgotten town. The building was decrepit, its doors hanging off the hinges, but it offered a temporary hideout. Inside, amidst the mouldering books and shattered glass, I found a newspaper clipping that chilled me to the core. It was an obituary, my obituary. The date was just days ago. According to the article, I had died in a tragic yet vague accident. This macabre discovery was a stark message. I was dead to the world, erased from existence. They had crafted my death as easily as one might delete a file. This grim realization sparked a frenzied obsession in me to uncover how deep their influence ran. I began breaking into local government offices at night, using the hacking skills that once served me well. My searches revealed a network of corruption and cover-ups, implicating officials at the highest levels in multiple countries. It was as if the organization had its tentacles in every pie, manipulating global events to their will. Armed with this knowledge, I understood the futility of my situation. There was no one to turn to, no law enforcement who could, or would, protect me from an entity that controlled the very fabric of society. Yet, this understanding brought a perverse sense of clarity. If I was to go down, it would not be without exposing them, even if it was the last thing I did. Determined, I spent days planning my next moves, holed up in the ruins of the library. But as I prepared to leave, ready to enact my desperate plan, the silence of the abandoned building was shattered by the sound of a single echoing gunshot outside. I froze, the sound a grim reminder of my reality. The war was not just psychological, it was very, very real. Cautiously, I peered out a broken window, only to see a circle of cloaked figures surrounding the library, each one holding a firearm. The hunt was over. The trap had been sprung. It seemed there was to be no grand final act, no last stand, just a quiet disappearance, a footnote in the shadowy annals of their operations. But even in that hopeless moment, my resolve hardened. I would not go silently. I scribbled down everything I knew, everything I had discovered, and hid it within the walls of that forsaken library. If I was to vanish, at least the truth wouldn't vanish with me. With my last bit of strength, I prepared to face them, to face the end, not as a victim, but as a beacon of truth in the overwhelming darkness. As the figures closed in, the thudding of my heartbeat was almost deafening. The encircling shadows advanced, their movements deliberate, coldly methodical. The once abandoned streets of the town now felt like an amphitheater, showcasing my final moments under the watchful eyes of my pursuers. Cornered, with nowhere to run, I retreated into the deepest part of the library, the stacks providing a labyrinthine cover. The scent of mildew and decaying paper filled the air, mixing with the sharp tang of my fear. I clutched a makeshift weapon, a piece of jagged metal I'd pried from a broken desk, knowing full well the futility of my defense against such overwhelming odds. They entered the library, their steps echoing through the hollow halls, a slow, deliberate march. Each step was a psychological hammer, designed to instill terror. I hid behind a fallen bookshelf, peering through a gap. The dim light flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls, distorting their figures into monstrous shapes. As they fanned out, their strategy became apparent. They weren't just hunting me. They were herding me, pushing me towards a specific part of the building. Despite my efforts to remain hidden, it was clear they knew exactly where I was. The realization that they had orchestrated every step of this dance was paralyzing. They weren't merely reacting, they were several moves ahead, predicting and manipulating my every decision. The leader of the group, a tall, imposing figure, finally stopped and turned directly toward my hiding spot. "Enough of this cat-and-mouse game," he spoke, his voice unnaturally calm, echoing off the stone walls. "You've lost, and you know it. Come out, and perhaps we can end this peacefully." His offer was a lie, a ploy to draw me out. But trapped and exhausted, I realized there were no good options left. With every exit covered, every shadow betraying me, fighting was futile. Yet, surrendering was not in my nature, not while a breath still remained in me. Clenching the metal tighter, I readied myself for a final desperate charge. Just as I was about to spring forward, a noise unlike any other shattered the tense silence, a deep, resonating groan that seemed to come from the very foundations of the library. The floor beneath the leader cracked, an unseen fault line giving way, and in an instant he was swallowed by a chasm that split the ground. The building, stressed beyond its limits, began to crumble around us. Chaos erupted. The remaining figures scrambled, their formation broken as parts of the ceiling caved in. Seizing the opportunity, I bolted from my cover, weaving through tumbling debris. Dust and screams filled the air, creating a disorienting cacophony that muffled my footsteps. I made for the back exit, only to find it blocked by rubble. In a last-ditch effort, I climbed through a narrow window, the shards of glass tearing at my clothes and skin. Outside, the cool night air hit me, a brief respite from the stifling fear inside. But freedom was short-lived. As I staggered away from the collapsing building, I felt a sharp sting in my neck. My fingers found a small dart, its payload already pumping through my veins. My vision blurred, legs buckling beneath me. As I fell, the last thing I saw were the cloaked figures emerging from the library, unharmed by the chaos, methodically advancing towards me. Lying there, the cold seeping into my bones, I felt a surreal detachment. They stood over me, their faces still hidden, the leader among them, unscathed by the fall, displaying a superhuman resilience that defied logic. "We can do this wherever you run," he said, a note of finality in his voice. "This ends now." As darkness claimed me, my thoughts drifted to the cache of documents hidden in the library walls. Maybe, just maybe, someone would find them, read them, and understand. Maybe my story wasn't the end, but a beginning. When consciousness returned, it was not the harsh light of interrogation lamps that greeted me, but the soft, diffuse glow of a hospital room. My body ached, each breath a laborious effort. I tried to move, but restraints bound my wrists and ankles, a stark reminder that my situation was far from safe. A doctor entered, his face a mask of professional detachment. "You're lucky to be alive," he said, checking the monitors that beeped rhythmically by my side. His voice was devoid of warmth, the words clinical and rehearsed. "You had a severe reaction to a tranquilizer. It's a miracle you didn't suffer more extensive damage." The door swung open again, and a man in a nondescript suit entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. The doctor excused himself, leaving me alone with the newcomer, who regarded me with an unsettling calmness. "You've caused quite a stir," he began, taking a seat beside the bed. "But it's over now. We've recovered the documents you hid. It was clever, but ultimately, nothing escapes our notice." The chill of defeat was bitter, yet I wasn't ready to surrender. "Why?" I croaked, the effort to speak sending waves of pain through my throat. "Why all this? Why me?" He studied me for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "You stumbled upon something much bigger than you realize. These documents, the projects they describe, they're part of a global initiative. Stability, control. These are necessary for the greater good. People mustn't know how their peace is kept." His justification hung heavy in the air, a twisted validation of tyranny. And the people you hurt, intimidate, kill, I managed, my voice a hoarse whisper. Collateral damage, he replied coldly. Necessary sacrifices. You've become part of this now, whether you intended to or not. His words were a sentence, sealing my fate. I realized then that my public disappearance, the orchestrated death in the media, it was all to discredit any truth I might speak. I was a ghost, erased from existence, my credibility destroyed. The man stood, straightening his jacket. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. You can agree to cooperate, live out your days in a comfortable obscurity, or we can ensure you're a direct threat to national security. Your choice. The decision was a false one, freedom an illusion. As he left, a deep sense of despair settled over me. But it was not the end, not yet. Days turned into weeks. I was transferred from the hospital to a secure facility, less a prison than a tomb. But among the quiet compliance of the facility's staff, one nurse's eyes told a different story. She smuggled in a small, folded piece of paper during one of her checks. Unfolding it later, I found a website URL and a simple message. Tell your story. We're listening. It was a lifeline thrown in the vast ocean of my despair. That night, I accessed the facility's restricted internet, a breach orchestrated by allies unknown. I posted everything, every detail, every horror on platforms across the web, dispersing it too widely to ever be fully retracted. As dawn broke, I knew my actions would have consequences. Yet, as I awaited the repercussions, a strange peace enveloped me. If nothing else, the truth was out there now. And truth, once set free, has a way of anchoring itself against the storms of oppression. The facility went into lockdown, the sound of alarms piercing the morning air. Footsteps approached, a final march. As the door to my room opened, I faced what was to come not as a victim, but as the spark of a larger fire, one that might just light the way for others to see and challenge the darkness. In the depths of that facility, surrounded by the very forces that sought to silence me, I finally understood. Some truths are worth the descent, worth the confrontation, worth everything. Even if I was to be a ghost, my story would haunt the halls of power, a spectre they could never quite banish.